Welcome back to Son of Chelsea. Daniel Childs here. Hope you're doing really well. Team selector time for the game against Liverpool at Anfield on Sunday afternoon. A huge game, probably the toughest return to Premier League action for Chelsea given the form of Liverpool so far this season, and especially at a ground where Chelsea haven't had too many great days in the past decade. But we're going to get into that. We're going to get into the team news from Maresca's press conference, looking a little bit at Liverpool, and then giving you my predicted lineup. Give me yours in the comments below. Give me your thoughts ahead of this huge game at the weekend. Before we get into any of the stuff regarding this preview, I want to say a massive thank you to the guys at Alloy Collectors who have been supporting the channel, and definitely get down in the description box below. Use my code SonOfChelsea at checkout to get yourself 15% off any order from Alloy Collectors. If you want to get yourself the retro Chelsea metal home shirt, which I think is a great collectible, or this season's kits, make sure to use my code down below for Alloy Collectors. A great place to get yourself some officially licensed Chelsea gear for a Chelsea family member or friend. I think it's definitely worth your time. So link in the description box below. But let's jump into it with Maresca's press conference. I think the great news is that Chelsea effectively have a fully fit squad. The unfortunate thing is we, of course, know we go into this game without two players, and we knew that at the full-time whistle of the Forest game, and that is, of course, due to suspension for Motka Correa and Wesley Fofana. We will address those two players when we get to my predicted lineup, but in terms of the rest of the news, the big thing is, of course, Reece James returning from injury. We knew he was back in first team training earlier this week, but Maresca did give some further context in the way they are looking to integrate or reintegrate Reece James into first team action. And I also thought we'd give some insight into some other players who've been suffering with injury from last season. This is what he had to say. He said, "It's complicated when you get injury. You were always looking for a solution. The solution with Reece is what we are using with Romeo Lavia and Wesley Fofana, using them just one game a week. Reece's body currently cannot play twice a week." So whether Reece James is thrown straight into the fire really with this Liverpool game, or it is judged that Panathinaikos in that Conference League game on Thursday is a better use for him in this next week, is going to be interesting, because, you know, Chelsea have so many games now. We have this game away at Liverpool, Panathinaikos away. Even though it's not as intense or competitive or kind of difficult as Anfield, it is still an away game in Europe, which can be tricky. Newcastle at home on Sunday, likely to be another intense Premier League game. An away trip to Newcastle in the Carabao Cup. And then, of course, Man United away. I think another Conference League game against Noah, and then Arsenal. And that is kind of this block of games before we go into the next international break, the last one before Christmas. So how you manage Reece is obviously going to be difficult. We know Reece's ability, even when he hasn't played much football, to have a key impact and defining impact in games for Chelsea. I'm just interested to hear with you guys. You know, obviously Reece is such a big name, and when he is on the team sheet, I think it does make an impact. But whether he goes straight into this game is going to be one that I think is going to be a big decision for Maresca, because I think there clearly is an instinct that, listen, you've got a talent like Reece James. His quality could make a difference in a tight game against Liverpool, and you'd want, on your best day, to have Reece James available going to Anfield, going to any of these big grounds in the Premier League. However, you got to think about the long term. But then even if you do think about the long term, the chances of him getting re-injured are probably still as likely, you know, because we know how vulnerable Reece James has been. So it's not, we've talked about this before, it is not a simple solution, unfortunately. But let's look at Liverpool, and obviously they've done really well so far this season under Arne Slot. I think a lot better than people expected. I don't think many people would have anticipated they would have done this well, given, you know, the awkward transition of having someone like Klopp, who was such a monumental figure for Liverpool for so many years, and to lose him and then to have someone come in and very much feel like maybe he's walking in and trying to fill the boots of someone who's so well beloved at that club, and the pressure and scrutiny. But I always did feel, and I said this in my pre-season predictions for the Premier League, that Liverpool have a lot of quality, and there wasn't much disruption during the summer. They didn't lose key players along with a key manager, you know. So on top of that, you know, you kind of look at it and go, there was going to be enough quality, and if Slot uses that quality to the best of his disposal, there's probably a nice transition here, and that's exactly what's happened with Liverpool. Although they have slightly altered their style of play, I think there still is a reliance maybe on, of course, Mohamed Salah, the way they're able to very much go direct to him on a number of occasions. I think that is something that Slot has done quite well. It's actually, there is a contrast between Slot and Maresca in using what worked for their teams last year and kind of trying to build on it and not completely scrap it, and trying to add more depth to their style of play rather than complete revolution. I guess evolution, not revolution, and I think that has worked for Slot, even though, of course, defensively, they've been immaculate so far, only conceding 2 goals. One of those was at home to Nottingham Forest in their only defeat this season. The other was away to Wolves. If you look at it, 0.3 goals conceded, only 2 so far. In terms of their style of play, I do think it is interesting. 6th so far for accurate balls in the Premier League, accurate long balls that is, and it shows that at times they are looking to get behind defences. Some of their wins recently, I was looking at one against Bournemouth where they are still looking to play on transition, even though they do have the quality in possession to keep the ball, to play it round. At times that has shown some fragility. Maybe they haven't been punished as much as you expect, but there is a solid base there of that back 4 or back 5, I guess, that's played a lot with each other, of Alexander-Arnold, who creatively so far has been brilliant for Liverpool as expected. Konate, Van Dijk, Alisson Becker in goal. Tsimikas has played a lot so far this season. And then Gravenberch has actually been probably one of the most important Liverpool players, because during the summer they were looking for kind of this defensive-minded number 6, and really Gravenberch has stepped out and become that for Arne Slot. So I think it's a case of good coaching and good flexibility from Arne Slot to look at his tools at his disposal and trying to get the best out of them, even though maybe it was seen at the time that they failed in the transfer window. And of course, Mohamed Salah still doing a lot creatively, even though maybe he won't reach the numbers he once did in a Liverpool shirt. He still is one of the most effective and deadly Premier League attackers. That is just clear. But Luis Diaz too is their top goal scorer so far this season with 5. In terms of goals and assists, Mohamed Salah has 8. In terms of goals per 90, Luis Diaz is top for that. XG, Salah is top, and Salah and Diaz very much battling in terms of attacking quality. Accurate passes per 90, Virgil van Dijk up there at 75%. Big chances created, Trent Alexander-Arnold leading with 5. In terms of their obvious threats, not a lot has changed so far. I think that if you were to walk into any game and you hadn't watched any of Liverpool this season, if you hadn't even known that they changed head coach, and I said to you who are going to be the big threats for Liverpool, or kind of big danger men or big players that you're going to have to kind of look out for defensively and offensively, you're kind of saying the obvious names, because they do have brilliant players, and those brilliant players do step up for you more times than not. So in terms of Chelsea, in terms of looking towards this game, it is going to be a big test for Chelsea. Not only because it's at a ground we don't regularly do well at, and Liverpool do well at, and their attacking quality is brilliant. Chelsea defensively haven't been that good this year, and even with that, of course, not having Cucurella and Fofana, who've been staples for Maresca so far, could be very disruptive. What I want from this game is a sense that Chelsea are at least laying a glove or doing something to hurt Liverpool. I think the worst outcome of this game for Maresca and for Chelsea is what happened in the first game against Man City, where we walk away from that game. Chelsea haven't scored, they haven't really created a lot, and it doesn't feel like Man City have had to get out of first or second gear really to win the game quite comfortably. That cannot happen on Sunday. In this run of games, I said this pre-international break, but I think it's key that Maresca's team go into these games and do what they did at times last season that gained them credit, which is a sense of progression, which is a sense you're in the game, you're actually hurting the opposition, you're not trying to play to their strengths, you're actually exploiting them on a number of occasions. And the things we have seen and credited from Maresca's Chelsea so far this year, that ability to disrupt opponents, that speed in attack, that ability to transition with the ball fastly and get it forward and impact things and get Palmer on the ball. Madueke showing the quality, Jadon Sancho proving a creative threat, and Jackson too in transition. All of these players hopefully performing the way they have in kind of games of what you'd consider lesser importance on a big stage, like being away at Liverpool, where these games do have a massive height, a massive scrutiny. They do have a lot of weight in people's minds, even if that's a little bit unfair and Chelsea narrowly lose on Sunday. These are the games that unfortunately in some ways people remember more than others. So I think it's important that Chelsea give a great account of themselves, and it isn't walking away from Sunday, even if Chelsea lose, which can be the case because it's Liverpool away. They have some brilliant players. Salah can, just create something out of nothing. Trent Alexander-Arnold can do the same from maybe a free kick, and you lose the game narrowly 2-1, 1-0. we want to walk away from this game feeling like it was close, that it wasn't a blowout, that it wasn't as embarrassing as last year at Anfield where we got battered 4-1. Chelsea have to do something that makes us feel that progression, that momentum can still keep on, even if it isn't a win. I think a draw is a very respectable result. And of course, above that, a win would be incredible. It really would. So let's go into my starting 11. I don't think, even with suspensions, there should be much change here. Even with the frustrations we got from the Forest game, if you remember my review of that game, was that I kind of felt that there were more positives than negatives, and I thought the way Chelsea responded to going 1-0 down was positive, and they created enough to win the game. And I think it was a combination of maybe some poor finishing, but also just brilliant goalkeeping from Matt Seltz, who I think, had one of the games of his life, unfortunately. And maybe on another day, Chelsea win. And also factoring in maybe a concern for this game is defensively, Chelsea did concede some good chances to Forest that Sanchez had to save late on in that game. So in the context of that, I'm not looking to change things radically in this game. Robert Sanchez will obviously stay in goal. Listen, this is one of those games where he cannot afford to make cheap errors on the ball if Chelsea are building out from the back. I'd like to think Chelsea look to play a more direct game, because we know at Anfield it is one of those very ferocious, intense games, especially in key periods of the game, in the opening 20 minutes of both halves, where you can be swamped, you can be overwhelmed, and it's something that, I think Sanchez has to be aware of, because if he makes a key error, he probably ain't getting away with it. The back four, I don't think Reece James starts this game. I think Malo Gusto does. Then Tosin, I think, is the obvious replacement for Wesley Fofana. I just think Tosin has actually had some good performances so far this season for Chelsea, and just in terms of Premier League quality, in terms of, I think, assurance, in terms of maybe that physical prowess to it to kind of counteract the threats that Liverpool naturally have at set pieces in what hopefully will be a close game for Chelsea. I think Tosin is the obvious option. Levi Colwill, I think, had a decent international break. Luckily came through unscathed when it looked like he was limping off against Forest, so I think he'll start. Renato Vega, I think this is the perfect time for him to start a Premier League game. Chilwell has barely got any minutes, so Vega, I think, will play this game. And I think rightly, he's proven a lot of people maybe wrong, or just has impressed people more than expected. So a big chance for him to start a Premier League game for Chelsea here. Midfield 2, Moises Caicedo has had a great start to the season for Chelsea. I think Chelsea's second best player behind Cole Palmer so far this season, and I think rightly will be getting his start here as well. Enzo Fernandez, I know, people had mixed views on my show during the international break, which looked at Enzo Fernandez. I think Fernandez will start this game. That probably means Lavia's starting the Panathinaikos game. Caicedo and Enzo, and I think especially Enzo Fernandez, if this is a game where Chelsea are not going to have a lot of the ball and they have a chance to transition, Fernandez has to get his passing right. This is where Fernandez really should be excelling. It's in games like this where he should be elevating his performance, and hopefully we'll see that, because I think he will still get trust from Enzo Maresca, but that shouldn't be non-stop, never ending. If his performances continue to tail off, I think those criticisms will be valid, as they have been so far this year. Madueke, Palmer and Sancho, I think, will be the three behind the striker. I think Madueke obviously really impressed in that second half against Nottingham Forest, and hopefully will show that directness and ability to add something in the final third. Cole Palmer, obviously, what a big stage for him potentially to win a game for Chelsea, and he's going to be starting most games. Sancho, I think, started his Chelsea career really well. I think he was guilty in that Forest game of just maybe trying at times to do a little bit too much on the ball. Sometimes less is more, and that's what he was doing in the first few weeks of his Chelsea career. I'd like to see that in a game like this, where he isn't going to have as much space and time and opportunity to run at defenders, or at least the frequency of him receiving the ball without being pressured is probably not going to be as high as it has been in recent weeks. So he needs to take those opportunities and be clinical when Chelsea do get into the final third against Liverpool. Then up top, is it Nkunku? Is it Jackson? I think it still will be Jackson, purely for his work rate off the ball. I think Jackson in a game like this can be really helpful for Chelsea defensively, maybe from corners, from being able to press from the front, his movement to drag Liverpool centre-backs away and maybe open up space for the likes of Sancho and especially Cole Palmer to make runs in behind. So I still think Jackson as a focal point will start this game, but Nkunku is definitely banging on the door, and it would be unfair to kind of forget that. And also, it's fair to point out that I don't think Jackson had a good performance against Nottingham Forest before the international break. And of course, Nkunku nearly scored a winner that was well saved by Celt. So that is my starting 11. Let me know yours in the comments below and thoughts ahead of the game. And I will see you again very soon. All the best.